Environmental laws and policies in Malaysia. Is it properly implemented or not? Environmental law, sometimes known as environmental and natural resources law, is a term used to explain regulations, statutes, local, national and international legislation, and treaties. It's designed to protect the environment from damage and to explain the legal consequences of such damage towards governments or private entities. Malaysia is suffering from various environmental problems such as pollution, land degradation, deforestation, biodiversity degradation, depletion of environmental resources, wetland degradation, urban solid waste management. The government of Malaysia has enacted different laws in different periods for conserving and developing the environments. The Environmental Quality Act 1974 was Malaysia's first dedicated environmental legislation, enacted in 1975. Its goal was to prevent and manage pollution, as well as to develop a system that punishes those who destroy the environment. The enforcement of laws governing biodiversity remains a challenge. Muhammad, 2011, in his study, stated that the environmental laws and policies are not properly implemented due to some causes and problems, such as lack of effective mechanism, inadequately designed legal mandates, and inadequate political commitments and popular support. The environmental laws and policies are also not properly implemented due to lack of qualified planners/policy makers, lack of monitoring and continuous assessment, lack of trained lawyers to deal with regulating environmental quality, lack of enforcement, inadequate information of natural resources and scientific research, non-implementation of the law that polluter pays. Firstly, lack of effective mechanism. There is no effective mechanism in place to ensure enforcement and compliance. It should be given proper powers and responsibilities and function as a type of international administrative agency. Environmental laws are not self-executing, and they cannot work unless they are effectively implemented. It is obvious that conservation laws that are not properly adapted to each developing nation's unique political, social, economic, cultural, and ecological situations are likely to be ineffective or worse. Secondly is, inadequately designed legal mandates. Most of the international environmental laws in developing states have been poorly conceived. They are overly general, purposefully confusing, frequently self-contradictory, overly tolerant, and lacking of real teeth, and there is lack of coordination among multiple government agencies with decision-making ability in planning and economic development. Lastly is, inadequate political commitments. It has been stated that any major environmental policy decision always has an approaching political conflict between various interests, since environmental issues tend to incorporate several governmental activities such as transportation, land planning, and so on. Monitoring is also still lacking in this process. Although there are a number of laws and acts enacted by the government, but due to the lack of supervision by the related parties, most development will focus on their profit and forgetting about the consequences that will happen. Non-implementation, non-enforcement, and non-compliance are so common in the majority of the countries that they must be considered as the norm rather than the exception. There are several ways to improve the implementation of environmental laws and policy in Malaysia. Firstly, by promote active public participation. Secondly, policies and strategies for the improvement of the environment require continuous strengthening. Next, increase the limits of punishment and penalties and establishing one-stop center at the federal government level to implement environmental protection measures as well as enforcing of regulations. Lastly, implement the religious including Islamic principles of environmental laws. Current Malaysian environmental laws and enforcement are still far from perfect but have huge potential to make it right. If and only if the environmental law and enforcement can be in Malaysia, then this nation could be said to be heading towards that goal.